On my wedding day, my mother-in-law threw my dress into the trash and sneered, "You'll wear the one I picked, or there's no wedding." I was devastated until my bridesmaid whispered, "Check the security camera footage." What I saw made my mother-in-law instantly regret everything. I don't even know where to start because I'm still shaking just thinking about it. My wedding day was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it turned into a battle I never expected to have to fight. I should have known my mother-in-law would try something. She never liked me. Never thought I was good enough for her son. She made that clear from the first time I met her. Passive-aggressive comments, fake smiles, and the constant comparison to the perfect women she thought my fiancé should have ended up with. But I put up with it. For him. Because I loved him, and he loved me. Or so I thought. The wedding was set to take place in a beautiful venue just outside of Atlanta. It wasn't extravagant, but it was elegant, exactly what I wanted. I spent months planning every little detail, making sure everything was perfect. And my dress. Oh, my dress was everything. I had spent hours searching, trying on dozens before finally finding the one. It was classic, timeless, and it made me feel like the most beautiful version of myself. The night before the wedding, we all stayed at a hotel near the venue, bridesmaids in one suite, groomsmen in another. My dress was hanging safely in the closet, steamed and ready for the big day. I went to bed feeling nervous but excited. Then morning came. I woke up to the sound of my bridesmaids rushing around, whispering urgently. I could feel the tension in the room before I even opened my eyes. My maid of honor, Sarah, was pacing, her face pale with anger. "Where's my dress?" I asked groggily, rubbing my eyes. Silence. No one wanted to be the one to say it. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath. "It's gone." I sat up so fast my head spun. "What do you mean gone?" "We woke up early to set up a few things, and when we came back, it wasn't here. We searched everywhere, but it's gone." Panic clawed at my chest. This had to be a mistake. Maybe the hotel staff had moved it? Maybe someone accidentally took it? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. That's when my mother-in-law waltzed into the room like she owned the place. She was smirking. "Oh, don't worry, dear," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I took care of that hideous thing. You'll wear the dress I picked, or there won't be a wedding." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stared at her, waiting for her to say she was joking. But she wasn't. She actually did it. I couldn't even speak. My mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. My beautiful dress. The one I had chosen, the one I had dreamed of. Gone. And then she pulled out the dress she had chosen. If you could even call it a dress. It was a monstrous, outdated thing, frilly lace, oversized bows, a neckline so high it looked suffocating. It was her wedding dress. The same one she had worn decades ago, yellowed with age, smelling faintly of mothballs. "You'll wear this," she said firmly. "It's tradition." Tradition? Tradition? I felt my blood boiling, but before I could scream, Sarah leaned in close and whispered, "Check the security camera footage." I hadn't even thought about that. The hotel had cameras in the hallways. If my dress was stolen from this room, there would be proof. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding, and called the front desk. "I need to see the security footage from this floor." "Now." They hesitated, saying they could only release it to the bride or groom. "I am the bride," I snapped. "And my wedding dress is missing." That was enough to get them moving. Within minutes, I was standing in the hotel office, watching the footage play on the screen. And there she was. My mother-in-law, creeping into my room before dawn, a sick smile on her face as she grabbed my dress from the closet. She didn't just take it. She dragged it down the hall, stuffing it into a large garbage bag like it was nothing more than trash. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. The next part of the footage showed her walking outside to the hotel's dumpster. She looked around, making sure no one was watching, then tossed my dress inside like a piece of garbage. I couldn't breathe. My whole body was shaking. Sarah gasped beside me. "That bitch." The hotel manager looked just as horrified. "I'll send someone to check the dumpster right now." I felt like throwing up. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I turned to the manager. "Save that footage. I want a copy." Then I stormed out. When I got back to the suite, my mother-in-law was still there, lounging on the couch like she owned the place. She saw my face and smirked. "Come to your senses yet, dear? Ready to wear something appropriate?" I smiled. The kind of smile that made her shift uncomfortably. "Oh, don't worry," I said sweetly. "I've got something perfect in mind." I pulled out my phone and hit play. Her face paled as the video started. The clear footage of her, stealing my dress, shoving it into a garbage bag, and dumping it like trash. "You," she stammered, her voice shaking. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said, my voice cold. And at that moment, I saw something I never thought I'd see. For the first time since I met her, my mother-in-law was afraid. And she should be. Because this wedding wasn't over. And neither was I. My mother-in-law's face turned ghostly pale as the security footage played on my phone. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the video, where she could be seen dragging my dress down the hall like it was an old rug. You. She started, her voice shaky. You wouldn't show that to anyone. I locked eyes with her. I had never felt so sure of anything in my life. Oh, I will, I said, my voice like ice. I turned the phone toward my bridesmaids. One by one, their expressions shifted from shock to pure rage. Sarah was the first to speak. You monster, she spat. My mother-in-law let out a nervous chuckle, but it was forced. Oh, come on. You're all overreacting. It was just a dress. And look, it's still your wedding day. You should be thanking me for what? I cut in, stepping closer. Trying to control me? Humiliating me? Ruining my wedding just so you could force me into your idea of perfection. She flinched. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was scrambling for control, trying to come up with a way to flip the situation. But I wasn't giving her that chance. You have two choices, I said, my voice calm but firm. One, you tell everyone the truth. Right now. In front of my fiancé. In front of your entire family. You admit you stole my dress, threw it away, and tried to manipulate me into wearing that thing you brought. And you apologize. Publicly. She clenched her jaw. And the other? I lifted my phone. I send this video to everyone. The guests. The hotel. Your friends. The wedding vendors. I'll even send it to the bridal boutiques in the area so they know what kind of person you are. I leaned in closer. And let's not forget your precious social circle. I bet they'd love to see what their dear friend is capable of. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. She knew she had no way out. I could see the panic rising in her eyes. You wouldn't, she whispered, but there was no confidence in her voice. I raised an eyebrow. Try me. Before she could answer, the door swung open. My fiancé stood there, confused. What's going on? He asked, his eyes scanning the room. He saw the tension, the way his mother looked like she'd just seen a ghost. I didn't hesitate. She threw my dress away, I said bluntly. And we have video proof. His face dropped. What? Sarah turned to him. She stole it and dumped it in the hotel dumpster. We just watched it on security footage. He looked at his mother, waiting for her to deny it. To defend herself. But she didn't. Instead, she did something I wasn't expecting. She started crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from guilt. No. These were fake tears, the kind meant to manipulate and distract. She gasped dramatically, clutching her chest like she was on the verge of collapsing. I only did it because I wanted what was best for you, sweetheart, she sobbed, looking at her son with wide, desperate eyes. That dress was all wrong. I knew she'd regret wearing it, so I was just trying to help. I felt my stomach turn. This woman was unbelievable. But what mattered was his reaction. He hesitated. For a fraction of a second, I saw it, the doubt in his eyes. The hesitation, the part of him that wanted to believe her. And that's when something inside me snapped. Because this wasn't new. This was a pattern. The excuses. The fake tears. The guilt trips. The constant pressure to make her the victim. I had ignored the red flags for too long. I turned to him, my voice low. Do not defend her right now. He opened his mouth, but I wasn't finished. You need to decide right now what kind of man you are. Are you the kind of man who stands by his wife? Or the kind of man who lets his mommy run his life? The whole room was silent. I could see the battle in his mind. The years of conditioning, the fear of upsetting his mother. But I could also see something else. He was afraid of losing me. Finally, he let out a slow breath. Then he turned to his mother. I can't believe you did this, he said, his voice cold. You ruined our wedding day. Her face twisted in fury. Ruined? I saved it. She would have looked ridiculous in that dress. Enough. His voice was sharper this time. Firmer. His mother looked at him like he had just slapped her. She wasn't used to him speaking to her like that. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He pulled out his phone and held it up. I'm sending the video to Dad, he said. And to Aunt Susan. And to everyone. Her eyes bulged. No, you can't. Do you know what this will do to me? What people will think. That's the point, he said flatly. And for the first time, my mother-in-law realized she had lost. Her face twisted into a mask of rage. Her breathing was heavy, her eyes wild. You'll regret this, she hissed. Both of you. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out. We stood there, frozen. The air was thick with tension. Sarah was the first to break the silence. Holy shit. I exhaled. My legs felt like jelly. We're not done, I said, turning to my fiancé. We still need to find my dress. He nodded, already pulling out his phone to call the hotel staff. But I knew, deep down, that the real battle had just begun. Because my mother-in-law wasn't the type to go down without a fight. And something told me. She was far from finished. I thought that was it. I thought she had stormed off, defeated. That I had finally won. But I underestimated her. Because my mother-in-law wasn't just angry. She was vengeful. As my fiancé made calls to the hotel staff, trying to recover my dress from the dumpster, my bridesmaids surrounded me, their faces a mix of anger and concern. What if they can't find it? One of them whispered. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to think about that. My dress was more than just fabric. It was my choice. My moment. Just then, the hotel manager knocked on the door, looking grim. We checked the dumpster, he said hesitantly. My stomach dropped. And? He rubbed the back of his neck. It's not there. I blinked. What? We went through all the bags. We even checked the security footage again. Someone took it. The room went silent. Sarah let out a sharp breath. Who the hell would steal a wedding dress from a dumpster? Then a horrible realization hit me. I turned to the manager, my voice shaking. Do you see anyone else on the footage? He hesitated. We do. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. I felt my blood turn to ice. Because there, in the grainy footage, was my mother-in-law, taking the dress back out of the dumpster. She wasn't throwing it away in a fit of rage. She had a plan. And whatever it wasn't good. Where did she go? I asked, my heart pounding. The manager frowned, scrolling through the footage. Then his face darkened. She left the hotel, got in her car and drove off. With my dress. I felt dizzy. My mother-in-law didn't just want to ruin my wedding. She wanted to make sure I couldn't fix it. Call her, Sarah said, grabbing my fiancé's arm. Right now. He nodded and dialed. I watched as he held the phone to his ear, his expression growing more frustrated with each passing second. She's not answering, he muttered. Of course she wasn't. A pit formed in my stomach. Where would she go? What was she doing? Then it hit me. My mother-in-law had made a comment months ago. A threat, really, but I had brushed it off at the time. If you ever do anything to embarrass this family, I will make sure that dress never sees the light of day. I had thought she was being dramatic. That it was just another one of her guilt-tripping, manipulative comments. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. I turned to my fiancé, my voice sharp. She's destroying it. His eyes widened. What? She took it so she could ruin it. Burn it, shred it, dump it in a river or something. My bridesmaids gasped. Sarah was already grabbing her purse. We need to find her. I nodded. Does anyone know where she would go? My fiancé hesitated, then cursed under his breath. Her house. She has a fire pit in the backyard. Oh my God. Without thinking, I turned and ran for the door. Wait. Where are you going? My fiancé called after me. I spun around. To stop her. Sarah and a few of my bridesmaids didn't hesitate. They followed me out the door, leaving my fiancé and the rest standing in stunned silence. We sprinted through the hotel lobby, ignoring the confused stares from guests. When we reached the parking lot, Sarah yanked her car keys from her purse. Get in, she ordered. I barely had time to buckle my seatbelt before she peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. The drive to my mother-in-law's house was a blur. My hands were shaking, my chest tight with anxiety. Please don't let me be too late. When we finally pulled up to her house, my stomach dropped. Because there, in the backyard, was my dress. And she was holding a pair of scissors. I jumped out of the car so fast I nearly tripped. Stop. She turned, eyes wide, caught red-handed. The dress was spread out on a table, the fabric already slashed in several places. For a second, she just stared at me. Then she smiled. The kind of smile that sent chills down my spine. Oh, sweetheart, she cooed. You're too late. My vision went red. I wasn't thinking anymore. I lunged. She barely had time to react before I grabbed the dress and ripped it from the table. The fabric was torn in places, but I didn't care. I wasn't letting her win. You psycho, Sarah snapped, stepping between us. You actually tried to destroy her dress? What the hell is wrong with you? My mother-in-law crossed her arms, completely unbothered. I did what I had to do. My voice was shaking. You had to ruin my wedding? You had to try and control me? She tilted her head. Oh, sweetheart. You were never meant to be part of this family. I froze. She meant that. She had never intended to let me have my wedding. Never intended to let me marry her son. Everything she had done, the comments, the manipulation, the dress, it was all leading to this moment. And suddenly, I knew. This wasn't just about the dress. It was about power. And she was willing to do anything to keep it. My hands clenched into fists. I had played nice for too long. But I wasn't playing anymore. The last straw, I stood there, gripping the torn remains of my wedding dress, my chest rising and falling with deep, uneven breaths. My mother-in-law's words echoed in my head. You were never meant to be part of this family. It wasn't just a cruel jab. It was the truth. She had never wanted me here. And she had done everything in her power to make sure I knew it. Sarah was still yelling, calling her a psycho, a manipulative control freak, but I barely heard her. My ears were ringing. My heart was hammering in my chest. I turned to my mother-in-law, my voice eerily calm. "You think you've won?" She smirked, folding her arms like this was just a minor inconvenience to her. "I don't think I've won, dear. I know I have." That was it. That was the moment I broke. "You don't get to decide that." My voice was shaking, but my anger was controlled, sharp. "You have spent years trying to manipulate and control your son's life. You've treated me like garbage because you can't stand the idea of him loving someone you didn't pick out." Her smirk faltered. "But you know what's really pathetic?" I continued, stepping closer. "Even after everything you've done, I still would have married him. I still would have walked down that aisle, not because of you, but in spite of you." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please shut up," I snapped. "You're not the queen of this family. You don't get to decide who's worthy. You don't get to decide anything anymore." My mother-in-law looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And then my fiancé's voice cut through the tension. "I can't believe you," he said, his tone low and trembling. I turned to see him standing at the edge of the yard, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. My mother-in-law's confidence wavered. "Sweetheart, I don't," he cut in, his voice raw. "Just don't." For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Disgust. "You lied to me," he continued, stepping forward. "You told me you wanted what was best for me, but that was never the truth, was it?" She let out a nervous laugh. "I was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" His voice cracked. "From her? From someone who actually loves me? Someone who treats me like an adult instead of a child you can control." Her eyes darted between us, looking for a way out. But there wasn't one. "You ruined my wedding day," I said, my voice steady. "But you didn't ruin me. And you sure as hell didn't ruin us." And then I turned to my fiancé. "Did you?" The question hung in the air, heavier than anything else. Because this was it. The moment that would decide everything. My mother-in-law saw the hesitation in his eyes, and like a snake sensing weakness, she lunged. "Sweetheart, you don't have to do this," she said quickly. "We can fix this. Just come home. I'll handle everything. You don't have to marry her." Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. Then he exhaled, long and shaky. And when he spoke, his voice was different. "I want to marry her." My mother-in-law flinched. His voice grew stronger. "And I don't want you in my life anymore." She gasped, stumbling back like he had struck her. "You don't mean that." "I do." His voice didn't waver. "You didn't just ruin today. You've been ruining everything for years. And I've let you. But not anymore." Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time, they weren't fake. This time, they were real. And I realized something. She wasn't just losing me. She was losing him. My fiancé took a deep breath, then turned to me. "I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "And if you'll still have me, I want to marry you today. Right now." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at him, at the man who had just made the biggest decision of his life. And I knew my answer. Yes. The word barely left my lips before he pulled me into a tight embrace, holding me like he never wanted to let go. Behind us, my mother-in-law let out a broken sob. And then she did the only thing left to do. She turned and walked away. The wedding we deserved, we got married that day. My dress was ruined, but it didn't matter. One of my bridesmaids had a simple white gown in her suitcase, something she had packed for the reception. It wasn't what I had planned, but it was perfect. We stood in front of our closest family and friends, my fiancé's father walking him down the aisle instead of his mother. And when we said our vows, there wasn't a single doubt in my heart. As for my mother-in-law, she wasn't there. She didn't call, didn't text. She was gone. For months, she tried to reach out. Sent emails. Left voicemails, begging for another chance. Swearing she had changed. But we knew better. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she lost. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Because in the end, I did win. Not just the wedding, but my future, and that was worth more than any dress in the world.